This is Angler Creek as it passes under the Trans-Canada Highway and hurries on its way over the many rocky slopes on its way to Lake Superior. As picturesque as it is, it's just one of the dozens of little creeks along the North Shore that splash over the Canadian Shield on their way to the big lake. But Angler has its own very special place in Canadian history. In the early part of the Second World War, a spot along one of its meanders on a sandy flat was chosen as an excellent, out-of-the-way, very secure spot to create a prisoner of war camp. The nearby town of Marathon did not exist at the time and was only a little railway siding known as Peninsula, and the Trans-Canada Highway through the area was not completed until 1956. At the time, this location was the epitome of the expression, the middle of nowhere. At this point in the war, it was quite hazardous and impossible for Britain to house 10 to 20,000 captured German warriors, shot down and captured during the bombing raids on London, or from captured U-boat crews, or from British victories in the North African campaign. Because U-boat attacks in the Battle of the Atlantic were wiping out hundreds of supply vessels, Britain was rationing food for all citizens. Holding and sustaining captured forces of the enemy in their midst was considered to be a burden on the economy and, most of all, a threat to their security. The British government contacted Canada to make arrangements to hold captured personnel there. Canada had only a few months to find locations and construct the prisoner of war camps. A number of lockups were created in northern Ontario, including Naze, Red Rock, and Angler. A whole segment of the military had to be created to administer and secure these facilities. They were known as the Veterans Guards.
In a unit called the Veterans Guards of Canada.
Yes.
Now, the initial group of them was formed of World War I vets,
Right.
who weren't, because of age or physical condition, weren't able to go overseas. However, they were quite fit to guard bridges, to guard government buildings, or important buildings of any kind, railway installations, and also prisoners of war.
One of the early detainees was a captured German submarine U-26 crew member, Paul Mengelberg. He later became a Canadian citizen. Paul relates some of his first experiences in Canada.
Before we came over, we had one of the French free captains in England at the camp talking to the individual, including myself too, that when we get into Canada, we would be in chain gangs, there would be snow and ice all year round, and we would be put to work to build a highway. Now, snow and ice and building a highway and chain gangs, that doesn't... Well, we got to Canada, snow that high. Number one, he was right, And as we traveled from Halifax, 3 days and we arrived at Angler around noon. And new blue sky, cold as the dickens. Then from the siding, from the railroad into the camp, we had to walk about a mile. All up the hill and we were down, then over the bridge and then into the camp.
Across the country followed a pretty well standard pattern. A sports field with a recreation center, prisoners' nest, an office, a little office building for the people who ran the internal economy of the camp, a hospital, a mess hall, and the prisoners' quarters. Those were pretty well the main structures, plus the 8 separate H-huts where the guards stayed and the headquarters building for the guards.
And the first thing they did with us was you had to strip completely to the skin, and lay everything out on the bunk. And they confiscated everything that was unsafe as far as they were concerned, And then a big envelope, everything in with name, and then you your number, yeah. And then you could get dressed again. Next day, you got everything back.
Remember, the guards were only there to look after the security of the place. They weren't there to tell anybody who's going to peel potatoes today or who's going to wash floors today.
No, we cooked for ourselves. We had all. We were self-contained. We got the grub in there, and we had fellows from the submarine cooks here, and they became the cook, yeah.
So it became a very German place inside of that camp.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Remember though that these rules are laid down in the Geneva Convention, and including what rights the guards had if somebody tried to escape, what authority the senior member of the German staff, what authority that person had. Mm-hmm. What is to be done if people break the rules.
Because, like I say, it was always outside the barbed wire.
Yeah.
Like, we're never allowed to go inside.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
John Molina was in the Veterans Guards and spent some time as a guard at the Angler camp.
And this call came out for volunteers to go to Camp Angler. So I figured, well, I wanted to spend time in the Army. I enjoyed my life in the Army because I had no difficulty. I was never in trouble. I was enlisted, so it wasn't a situation like some guys had that were conscripted. Mind you, the old Veterans Guard, like most of the guys, were from the First World War guys. And then when they start, discharging them and sending them back to where they came from, they needed to supplement the camp with new blood, and so they sent in the young guys.
75% of all the POWs were Hermann Göring's flying circus, you know, Air Force. Maybe 70 of us were from different submarines, yeah? And a merchant ship converted into a cruiser, some guys were there too, and then a handful from the Army. Yeah? That was all. We had H-HOTs, yeah? And I was in 5A. And there was 5B that was full of NCOs and COs. Yeah? And the oldest one of that hut, I was the oldest rank-wise, yeah, and also service-wise. Yeah?
Yeah, just outside the gates, outside the prison camp, we had barracks there, and we had our, I guess, kitchen, eating areas and that sort of.
I don't remember being in other towers. I basically did that one tower, but I know we had to sleep in them. And if the box stove, the fire went out, we froze. But if we were able to maintain the fire, we kept warm. Listen, when those boards shrunk, you could, there was that much opening, and the wind from that Lake Superior whistled through, and we'd be sleeping there with our overcoats and sheepskins on top. But once you got up there, you walked, you stayed on your guard. We had a powerful shield beam flashlights, and if they ever come too close to the wire, you had to sort of send them back, because before they came to the wire, there was a certain wire that they were not supposed to cross over. They stopped and started talking. They had to keep moving. They didn't allow conversations.
Now, I believe it was you, Jack, that told me that during that time, about 40% of the workforce of Northern Ontario had joined the military.
Was certainly true of, for instance, of the loggers.
And mining, perhaps.
Oh yeah, no, mining too.
Yeah.
But of course, it didn't take long before the government came up with restricted, certain jobs were restricted and you couldn't leave them.
And there was the shortage of workers then, so they were glad to have the prisoners of war also involved.
Well, they had formed number 2 company of the Canadian Forestry Corps in Thunder Bay. That's why they needed the prisoners to. Of course, always you have to remember that there was a greater demand for natural resources once the war started as well. Like there were people working in the hospital all the time as medical assistants. Trained medical assistants were put to work in the hospital. They didn't have to go out and be loggers. The people who were working in the kitchen, they didn't have to be loggers. And they didn't sort of go there for a course of training and then go back out in the bush. And there were a few jobs where people were employed, if you can put it that way.
A group that had to shovel coal to fill the bins for the guards and ours. And that was a group of 6 guys. And they put a guard with them, with a rifle, of course, yeah. And so they did their work. And I told them, what am I going to do with you? Oh, he said, you see, I can type right, yeah, and I speak a little bit of English. I could be a postmaster here, going out and help the interpreter open parcels. Mail comes in and distribute it and say, Now you promise me that you will stay out of trouble? He says, yes, sir. So I was postmaster. I could go out every morning.
Where would the mail and these parcels come from?
The Club de Damas Alemanas in Argentina. So they sent parcels, as aunt or uncle, which was wrong. And we had a lot of people, a lot of parcels come from the United States. States were not in war with us then. Or sometimes later on they came from Germany, but from the States particularly we got a lot of parcels, yeah. Parcels from home usually was tobacco.
Oh, yes. Letters?
Letters, we got letters, yeah, as many as we could. As they could write as many as they wish. But we were allowed for 2 letters and 2 postcards a month.
So you could send them back. How long would it take from a letter from Germany to get to you?
The fastest I got within 14 days.
Oh, that's not bad.
No. Yeah, but the war has just started, you know.
Yeah, true. Were the letters that you got from, like once you'd been in the camp, were the letters that you got from Germany, were any of them censored? Yeah? Parts were...
Oh yeah, some letters came, I know some fellows said it. What kind of stuff is this? You can't read the letter anymore, there's nothing in it left. They had a list of made up for people that would be a little bit out of line according to the inside belief here. You're a Nazi or you're German, yeah, and you do as we say, yeah. And if you would go against it, yeah, they would put you on a list here for court-martial. Huh?
Oh, yes.
At the end, by the end of the war, when we have won the war.
Yes.
I heard that so often, you know.
So rank continued to be a very important thing.
Oh yeah, they insisted that when you make your rounds around, and just for a walk, and pass an NCO, that you take your hands along when you talk to a superior. You had in Germany when you on the street salute a sergeant, yeah. But when I passed an Unteroffizier, or what we call an NCO, he said, "Hey, can you salute?" Or you said, "It makes you happy, sure, how are you?" And then, as aunt or uncle, which was wrong, but it didn't get the Canadians are very not thorough.
I can't think of the gentleman's name, but his nickname was Cherry Blossom.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And he had a drinking problem. By 10 o'clock in the morning, he'd be so juiced. But that's another, that's no concern of mine, I'm just relating an observation.
Cherry Blossom because his nose is kind of red, I would guess.
He looked like Will C. Fields, only in miniature. So he obviously had a bit of a drinking problem back then. Because he used to be a lieutenant, like his rank was lieutenant, but the letters would come to the camp as captain. So, you could imagine what kind of a guy we had.
Oh yeah, and then we had the breakout.
It was mid-April, and tensions were running high amongst the 559 German prisoners. After months of clandestine preparations, the date of a planned escape, April 20th, the Führer's birthday, was drawing near. Compasses had been fashioned from magnetized razor blades and needles. Prisoner uniforms had been redesigned as civilian clothing. Maps had been drawn, copied, and distributed. Tin cans filled with kitchen fat would serve as candles, complete with wicks made from underwear drawstring. They had even blackmailed a guard into handing over a radio, which they hid in a model of the prized German battleship Bismarck. Camp authorities congratulated the prisoners on their workmanship, unaware that the ship's gun turrets were knobs for operating the forbidden radio. The tunnel stretched 45 meters, 150 feet, outside the camp wall. Side tunnels enabled men to move from barrack to barrack as they covered for tunnel excavators at roll call. Since Angler was situated on sand, digging had been relatively easy. The challenge was to prevent the tunnel from collapsing. Reinforcements were constructed from wood braces that were wrenched from beneath the barracks and painstakingly sawed to size using straightened phonograph springs stretched between two handles. Every detail was checked and rechecked. Everything was in place, and then it began to rain, and rain for 3 days straight. Tension grew while the tunnels filled with water. On the morning of April 18, 1941, the horrified men discovered the excavation was beginning to collapse. By noon, 30 centimeters, 12 inches of water filled the tunnel. They would have to leave that night after roll call, or not at all. At dark, they lowered themselves into the freezing water of the black tunnel. Crouching in a line, they waited for the men at the front to open the tunnel outside the fence. Every noise made their hearts skip a beat. Was that gunfire? They knew that if they were caught escaping, they would be shot. Finally, the line began to move. One by one, they emerged from the tunnel, scrambled across a gully, and stole into the refuge of Superior's dark forests. Then one escapee stumbled over the digging tools left near a tunnel opening. Alerted by the sound, a guard decided to investigate. Moments later, he bounded to the phone. The unthinkable had occurred. An unknown number of German POWs had escaped. Only 28 of over 80 hopefuls managed to escape. 5 were shot, and 2 later died as they emerged from a nearby railway shack.
Leffelmeyer and Meidling, they got killed. And then a third one, he had a brain tumor, he died there too, by the name of Unk. 2 guys that escaped, they went as far as Calgary. Yes. By train, yeah.
4 others managed to board a boxcar on an eastbound freight train. Unfortunately for them, one of the POWs caught alerted 2 RCMP officers who were riding in an adjoining car. Most of the remaining escapees were quickly tracked down and returned to camp.
I know at the time when Japan entered the war, they broke all the camps up and then they amalgamated them and put them all in one camp, yeah? And then when we left, that must have been around June 42. Oh, yes. And we were shipped to CB.
In 1942, Angler became an internment camp for over 700 Japanese Canadians. 300 were subsequently released to work, leaving 425 at the camp. Here is what you would see today if you looked at the image of the site on Google Earth. Or if you fly over in a small plane. Or if you had seen one of the garages that looked like this on the shore side of the tracks in Marathon. Then you would have seen the wallboards that once clad the barracks at Camp 101, the Angler POW camp.